What I am about to tell you, I have never told anyone. Not my wife, not my children, not my closest friend of 40 years. I kept this secret buried deep inside me for decades, locked behind smiles and handshakes and champagne toasts and award ceremonies. But now, as I lie in this hospital bed with tubes in my arms and a machine counting my heartbeats, I realize that taking this secret to my grave would be the most selfish thing I have ever done. And trust me, I have done many selfish things. So listen carefully, because I am only going to say this once. And what I am about to tell you might be the most important thing you will ever hear in your entire life. My name does not matter. What matters is what I did and what it cost me. I was, by every measure you can think of, a successful man. I want you to understand that clearly before I continue. I am not some bitter failure looking back and making excuses. I was not a loser who dressed up his defeat as wisdom. I was the real thing. The kind of success that makes other people go quiet when you walk into a room. By the age of 34, I was running a company with 400 employees. By 40, that number was 2,000. I had a home in the hills that you could see from the highway. I had a car that made grown men stop and stare. I had a wife who was beautiful and kind, 2 children who were healthy and bright, and a reputation that opened every door in every room in every city I walked into. Magazines wrote about me. Universities invited me to speak. Young people would sit in auditoriums and look up at me with hungry eyes, wanting to know my secrets, wanting to know how I did it, how I built something from nothing, how I became the kind of man that others pointed at and said, that is what success looks like. And I would stand up there, straighten my tie, and tell them exactly what they wanted to hear. I would talk about hard work, about discipline, about vision, about sacrifice, and every single word I said was true. But none of it, not one single word, was the whole truth. Because the whole truth was something I could never say out loud. Not then, maybe not even now, but I am going to try because the clock is running down. And some truths are too heavy to carry alone. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always my worst day. Mondays had energy, Wednesdays had momentum, but Tuesdays were the day reality arrived without knocking. I was sitting in my office on the 32nd floor, looking out at a city that looked back at me like it owed me nothing. And my assistant walked in and said, "Sir, your son called. He wanted to remind you about his school play tonight." I looked at my calendar. I had a dinner. A very important dinner with very important people who were going to write a very large check. And without hesitating, without even feeling anything, I said, "Send him my apologies. Tell him I'll make it up to him." That was the 18th time that year I had said those exact words to my son. I know because he told me later. He had been counting. But that is not what changed everything. What changed everything happened later that night, after the dinner, after the handshakes, after the check was signed and the deal was done. I was sitting in the back of my car, alone, driving home through a city that glittered like it was made of diamonds, and my phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend, a man I had grown up with, a man who had been my closest companion in the years before success arrived and rearranged my entire life. The message was short. It said, "James died today, thought you should know." James. I sat there in that car and I realized, and this is the part that haunts me even now, I realized that I could not remember the last time I had spoken to James. Not months, not a year, longer. I had been so busy building my empire that I had not noticed the people inside it. slowly disappearing. I went home that night and I stood in the doorway of my son's room and watched him sleep. He was 10 years old, and as I stood there in the dark, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time, maybe ever. I felt afraid, not of losing money, not of failing. I felt afraid because I suddenly understood something that no business school, no mentor, no magazine had ever told me. I was succeeding at the wrong things. Now here is the part I need you to really hear. This is the secret, the actual secret, not the kind they sell you in books, not the kind that gets printed on motivational posters. The kind that sits in the chest of every truly successful person and quietly eats them alive from the inside. Success, as the world defines it, is designed to be bottomless. There is no finish line. There is no moment where the system taps you on the shoulder and says, "Well done. You made it. You can rest now." That moment does not exist. They do not build it in. And this is not an accident. This is the design, because the moment you feel like enough, the moment you feel satisfied, content, complete, you stop chasing. And a man who has stopped chasing is useless to the machine, so they make sure you never feel like enough. They move the goalpost every single time. I made my first million and thought, this is it. But the feeling lasted 3 days. Then I heard about someone who had 10 million, and suddenly my 1 million felt like nothing. I bought a big house and felt like a king for a week. Then I saw a bigger house, and mine became a source of shame. This is the trick. A game where winning feels like losing. I spent 30 years climbing, and at the top, I found nothing, just a higher mountain, and behind me were all the things I had dropped along the way. My friendships, my family, my time. I traded everything real for everything impressive. And the worst part? I chose it. Every single day, I met many successful men, and let me tell you the truth. They were not happy. They were restless, tired, afraid to stop, afraid that everything would collapse if they slowed down. One friend once said to me, "Do you ever feel like you are watching your own life from the outside? Like you are there, but not really there?" I knew exactly what he meant. He died 2 years later, alone, and now, here I am, at the end, and I finally understand something I should have understood much earlier. You are not your success. You are not your money, your title, or your status. You are a human being, and one day, your heart will stop. And on that day, you will not think about your achievements. You will think about the moments you missed. So let me ask you one question. If everything you are building disappeared tomorrow, what would you still have? Think about that. Because that answer is your real life. I spent my life running towards success, but in the end, I realized I was running away from myself. And the tragedy is not that I lost the race. The tragedy is that I won it. If I could leave you with one last truth, it would be this. Do not wait. Do not wait until it is too late. Stop. Look around. Breathe. The life you are postponing is the only one you will ever have. Goodbye.